Hello, everyone, and we are so thrilled you're joining us today. If you're joining us for the first time, my name is Kirsten Pugh, and I'm an Associate Director of the Negotiation and Conflict Resolution Program in Columbia University School of Professional Studies. I'm also an alum of the program, and today we are kicking off our fall NECR Alumni Career Deep Dive series. And every month we host an NECR alum who breaks down their career trajectory to help us better understand one of the very, very many different paths that a career in conflict resolution can go down. Please note, we will be recording today's deep dive, so that should be noted. Today I'm thrilled to welcome Deborah Sacher, who graduated from the NECR program in 2018. Following Deborah's presentation, there will be time for Q&A, so please use the QA function to share your questions with us. And now, without further ado, welcome Deborah.
Thank you. Thank you for that kind introduction, Kirsten. It's a pleasure to speak with you today and kick off the Alumni Deep Dive series.
Wonderful. Well, we're so happy you're here. And to get things started, can you tell us what led you to the NECR program?
Sure. It's a funny story. I had always been interested in peace and conflict resolution. I just never realized it was a field of study. I found the NECR program through my interest in climate change. I had been studying various aspects of environmental science for ages. In high school, I participated in science research in the field of carbon sequestration at the Columbia University Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory. Then, during my undergraduate career at Barnard College, I continued to study environmental policy to explore the debates surrounding environmental protection. As I learned about the topics at the forefront of global issues, I took a keen interest in water scarcity. Right now, there is a growing concern that water resource availability will pose social, economic, and political complications. Climate change poses a danger as a megatrend that will compound other drivers of conflict, including economic strife and competition over resources, and I wanted to know what I could do. So these socio-political issues specifically are heightened in areas such as the Middle East due to already tenuous relationships between bordering countries. So my undergraduate research thesis, The Effect of Climate Change on Water Scarcity in the Middle East, a regional analysis, compared climate predictions of the region in recent literature and assessed the likelihood of the anticipated conflict over freshwater resources. The climate change expectation, in conjunction with existing pressures of population growth, socioeconomic conflict over access to water, and political tensions over the right to water sources, put the Middle East at high risk for humanitarian conflict. My research recommendations included preemptive implementation of water resource management policies, really through an in-depth integrated assessment of anticipated conflict areas, or hot zones, I call them. And during college, I interned at the Earth Institute and found out about a new graduate level study tour of the Middle East to learn about how two countries in the Middle East, Jordan and Israel, are cooperating on environmental issues and managing shared natural resources such as water. It was my dream trip, and I wasn't eligible because it was being offered at the graduate level. So my first tip to all of you is to never accept no at face value. Always ask why. I asked my supervisors at the Earth Institute and eventually found out that although the trip had been designed at the graduate level, the admissions team was willing to entertain exceptional undergraduate applications. So then it was time to make my application exceptional. And it worked. I was selected as one of 9 Columbia students across multiple schools at the university for the very first Regional Environmental Sustainability in the Middle East program under the supervision of Dr. Beth Yoshida Fisher, director of the NECR program. It was a transformative experience and really laid the groundwork for my application to the NECR program in 2015. I kept up with events that the program organized on campus and even attended 3 separate capstone presentations prior to my acceptance in the program. I was fascinated by the different avenues that you could go down with this degree. I learned so much from these events. I couldn't even imagine what being a student in the program would be like.
That's great. And also some really good advice about asking why instead of taking no. So thanks for that as well. So can you tell us a little bit more about what your experience was like as a student?
Sure. As an NECR student, I remained engaged in environmental topics through more of a conflict mitigation lens. I actually had the opportunity to engage in international fieldwork in Kampala, Uganda, with the Center for Conflict Resolution. Now, Kirsten already knows about this because she was also awarded this opportunity, circled in yellow, and we were in the same fieldwork cohort. So effectively, as a consultant for CCOR, I researched relevant best practices for climate change adaptation. My white paper, Climate Change Adaptation Guidance for the Center for Conflict Resolution in Kampala, Uganda, used a comparative case study analysis to make recommendations for CCOR at the organizational, local, and regional levels. CCOR used this guidance not only to implement the recommendations, but also to gain a much needed source of funding and grant support for their environmental efforts. So it was truly a rewarding experience to have my research make a direct impact. And after I returned from Uganda, the Advanced Consortium on Cooperation, Conflict, and Complexity, or AC4, advertised a graduate student scholarship to present research at an international conference in Berlin. So I submitted my research from Uganda for consideration and was accepted. I was awarded a scholarship for a poster presentation at the International Association for Conflict Management Conference, IACM. The conference itself was phenomenal, and I could not believe that I was sitting in presentations with the authors from my school papers. I cited these people, and here they are, listening to me talk about my work. The IACM community was incredible, and that experience in Berlin was thrilling. I loved learning about cutting edge research happening in the field and learning about new aspects of conflict management that I really had never considered. The NECR coursework also exposed me to many new areas of interest outside of environmental peacebuilding. I really valued Professor Coleman's foundational course for that reason. The most interesting area I think that I had ever I hadn't even thought to explore was that of identity, mindset, morality. In the conflict resolution field, identity-based conflicts are based on people's core values, culture, psychology. And I really wanted to explore this area further, but was already coming up on my graduation from the NECR program. The summer prior to my capstone semester, and yes, back in the day, we had to do the entire capstone in one semester. So prior to that semester, I had the opportunity to travel to the Agahozo Shalom Youth Village in Rwanda on a multi-week fellowship. And there I was inspired to pursue qualitative identity research for my capstone project, which was entitled Identity in Conflict, Civilian Perpetrator Experience of the Rwandan Genocide. This heavy research stemmed from a fascination with the ability of normal people, families, friends, non-combatants, to commit atrocities against their neighbors in situations of genocide. I used the 1994 Rwandan genocide as a case study, and I was able to better understand the social world of a civilian genocide perpetrator using the theory of coordinated management of meaning. Here you can actually see a few excerpts from my research. You can see the CMM DAISY model on the right specifically. So CMM allows you to look at the intrapersonal conversation within oneself between their differing identities, as well as the differences between stories that one shares with others versus the stories that they share with themselves. So my data analysis led me to suggested intervention strategies that promoted conflict mitigation in other areas that are prone to similar identity-based conflict. And with this completed thesis, I had found a new passion in addition to environmental research. I went on to present this research at the International Association for Conflict Management 2018 conference held in Philadelphia, where my talk was actually selected for the featured government special topic panel hosted by a member of the US Department of Interior. I also participated this research or presented this research and my climate change adaptation research as posters for the Association for Conflict Resolution Greater New York Conference that same year. So my experience as a student really prepared me so well for opportunities in the future and future success. My advice to current students is to apply for everything. In college, I only really applied to things that I thought I might get, or I was pretty sure I was going to get. And I quickly learned that life was too short and you're no worse off than not applying at all. So I truly hope that any current student will take this advice to heart and really try to go after their dreams. I never thought I would do fieldwork in Uganda. Never dreamed of going to Uganda. And I was only in the first semester. It was my first summer in the program. I didn't think I had a shot. And the IACM scholarship, the fellowship in Rwanda. But if you don't apply, you'll never know.
More good advice. Also, tell us about what the next thing is you applied for after that.
Oh, sure. Upon my graduation from the NECR program, I applied for a fellowship in Israel through the American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee, JDC Israel, to pursue research and oversight on their $1 million grant entitled A Community of Equals. This conflict mitigation and management grant, awarded by USAID West Bank Gaza and the US Embassy in Israel, sought to bring together individuals of different backgrounds from areas of conflict in people-to-people reconciliation activities through the prism of disability. So all people with disabilities, be they Israeli Jews, Israeli Palestinians, or Palestinians, face universal societal prejudices and preconceptions that inhibit their educational, occupational, social, economic, and even creative growth. So by going beyond religious, ethnic, or national identity, public leaders and people with disabilities can shift the focus toward a broader discourse on social change. As such, JDC Israel aimed to transform the societal position of people with disabilities from outsiders to insiders, recognizing that this requires a change among people with disabilities themselves, as well as within their families, communities, and wider social contexts. The political conflict between Israel and the Palestinians is very sensitive, complex, and quite honestly difficult to address directly. The project was therefore designed to tackle the conflict by bringing people from all sides together to deal with a challenge that they shared: how to improve the status of people with disabilities in society. So the framework for a community of equals was comprised of several distinct elements. There were 4 programs, one for religious leaders who have a profound influence on their congregants in terms of awareness of disability issues. The second one was academic researchers. We held an academic researchers forum of people who can really shape the public policy on disability rights and access in the region. The third one was sports for people with disabilities to promote healthy living and fun in a space that's often overlooked. And the fourth was women empowerment groups for women with disabilities who have the additional challenge of gender. Specifically, we sought greater equality of access to rights and services, and a greater inclusion of people with disabilities in economic, social, cultural, and political spheres. Unfortunately, the Anti-Terrorism Clarification Act, passed by the US Congress in July 2018, resulted in USAID's decision to terminate the program prematurely in 2019. But it truly was an opportunity of a lifetime. I worked with Israel Unlimited, JDC's Center for Disabilities, and I joined a cohort of other young professionals stationed around the world to work on other humanitarian issues throughout the organization. I was trained on USAID specific programs and procedures. I engaged with local partners in the field. I participated in monitoring and evaluation on the grant, and I even had a hand in the grant's audit process. So it truly was an incredible opportunity. And during my fellowship in Israel, I attended the International Conference on Innovations in Conflict Resolution and Mediation in Tel Aviv. I saw that Dr. Jay Rothman, one of the leaders in identity-based conflict resolution, was speaking. And having read a lot of his work for my capstone thesis, I knew I had to attend his lecture. It turns out that he was in the midst of submitting a proposal for a chapter in the latest edition of Rowman and Littlefield's Peace and Security in the 21st Century series, entitled New Directions in Peacebuilding Evaluation. At the end of his lecture on action evaluation, he offhandedly mentioned that if anyone in the room was interested in assisting him on writing the chapter, he'd be happy to have the collaboration. Well, in the spirit of being no worse off than having not tried at all, I approached him and told him that if the offer still stands, I would love to assist. Again, having recently cited him in my graduate thesis, I was really excited to further explore identity research in this capacity. So together, we published Using Action Evaluation to Identify Shared Conceptions of Success Towards Generating Islands of Theory, which uses data collected from Israeli and Palestinian youth projects to redefine success in these instances and suggest that the conflict resolution field should instead look towards smaller islands of theory when designing intervention strategies in order to make more accurately and a more accurate gauge of what success really is. And yeah, now I was a published author. Additionally, I remained involved in a number of special events with within the JDC's DNA social development model. So the DNA program implementation strategy allows the organization to act as a social incubator as they design, nurture, and accelerate successful programs and initiatives. A new program was the Sound of Silence program that was in the development stage, and it provided social services to the deaf and hearing impaired Bedouin community in Israel. So during the research phase, growing concerns surfaced about ensuring culturally sensitive programming, specifically for the inclusion of women. So I partnered with a colleague at Columbia University, you might recognize her on the left, to produce culturally sensitive programming. The inclusion of women with deaf and hearing impaired children in Israeli Bedouin society. This research utilized a CMM methodology and framework to assess the needs of the participants and make recommendations for the pilot stage of the program. Kirsten and I presented the research at the International Association for Conflict Management 2019 conference in Dublin.
Oh, nice trip down memory lane. Thank you for sharing. So fast forwarding a little bit, how have you been able to stay active during the COVID pandemic?
Yes, it's definitely been more challenging to pursue new research at this time, though I am open to collaboration. You will all have my email. But because of this, I went back through my coursework, my NECR coursework, to see what I could polish up. During my mediation class, I had studied different mediation techniques commonly used when mediating environmental disputes, and I produced a final paper on that topic. So my research, considering mediation style when resolving complex environmental conflict, explored the use of mixing facilitative and advisory approaches to mediation in a co-facilitator model, co-mediator model. It was accepted to the 2020 IACM virtual conference, and from the comfort of my living room in Israel's periphery, I sparked some incredible discussions amongst dedicated academics and practitioners in the mediation field, specifically environmental mediation. So I was really grateful. And again, I think this warrants another tip for current students. This research stemmed from my final paper in the mediation class. The work that you are doing is an important contribution to the field, and I would wholeheartedly urge you to share it and use it to connect with other researchers who want to share your work and who perhaps share your interest.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Sure.
And I certainly have questions for you, but I want to give other people the opportunity to ask
Yes.
first, if that sounds good. Oh, do you want to talk about your contact information real quick?
Yes, please. As noted on the screen, feel free to reach out.
Well, thank you. Thanks for sharing that. So I have one question right here, and I think based on the timing, they can chat me if I'm wrong, but this might be about your capstone paper.
Mhm.
Um, the question is wondering what kind of resolution in summary you were proposing. Was this about post-conflict resolution, or what could have been done at the time?
Sure. So, yes, the research was qualitative research that, in order to avoid having to go about using any sort of IRB process, make sure that we weren't harming anyone in pursuing the research. There's a lot of strict standards that need to be maintained. So in order to adhere to all of those, I used I think I have here an excerpt from the uh, archives in Rwanda. Sorry, forgive me, all the way back here. Um, so I went to the Genocide Archive located in Rwanda while I was there, and they had a whole vast inventory of testimonies, but they were in Kinyarwanda, which is the language spoken throughout all of Rwanda. And very few of them had been translated to English. So I was able to partner with a contact that I made in Rwanda and translate it to English and pursue the intrapersonal aspects of what was going on inside the mind of a civilian perpetrator. And I found really interesting things like he referred to himself as a child, even though he was in his mid-late 20s during the event. And he also would switch his terminology. So he would talk about his childhood in one way, and then when he was talking about the event time period, he switched to speaking more in terms of military, using military language. And so I found these sorts of things, and with that information, I generalized it. So, the use of military language, the ability to perceive yourself as without fault, as being a child, and not and following what your parent, in this case, the leaders in government were doing, or army were doing. So I used these to put together a few recommendations for civic engagement and strategic weaving, community building, in order to make sure that a recommendation could be applicable to um, a future scenario for this sort of uh, horrible atrocity.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? If so, please feel free to type them into the Q&A function on Zoom. And while we're waiting, I have one for you, Deborah.
Sure.
So it sort of goes back to my last question for you about just living in, living during a pandemic and how much our lives have shifted. And
Yes.
especially for one of the things I really enjoyed was listening to how you were able to create and leverage opportunities, especially through like different functions you were attending, and just make those connections. And so I was wondering if you had any thoughts, advice, or maybe experiences for doing seeking out opportunities and networking with people in the field, but essentially virtually.
Yes, absolutely. My advice is that your cohort, the group of people that you're going through this program with, are going to be the future leaders in this field. You are at Columbia University. You are learning under excellent, excellent experts and practitioners in the field, and you can really utilize the people around you. So I made sure to maintain my connections with these incredible people. And I also think, from my experience, that the NECR program attracts a certain type of person. We're all interested in some sort of peace building, better understanding, better communication. And that takes a certain type of person. So regardless of whether or not, someone's going to be useful to you, it's great to connect with people who share that interest and share that uh, value, I would even call it. So during this time when you can't see people in person, I would absolutely recommend reaching out and forming virtual sessions, phone calls, Zoom chats, and because these things really lay the groundwork for future relationships. Also, everyone's at their computer. Everyone is looking at their emails all the time. This is a great time to take advantage of people who you might not normally have access to. Some practitioner who's highly experienced in the field and is constantly working traditionally might not be able to see your email, but now they're home. They're homebound. They are looking for things to do. Now is a great time to really put yourself out there and not limit yourself to your geographic area. You're no longer, constrained by Manhattan or New York City, the metro area. You are able to connect with researchers in the Middle East or in any sort of location that you might be interested in pursuing. So I would highly recommend taking advantage of this unfortunate and crazy situation. And yeah, uh, again, going back to my previous advice, uh, go for it. The worst that happens is you don't hear back or they say no, and that's fine. You tried. But if you don't try, you'll never know.
Absolutely true. Thank you for sharing that. We actually have a couple more questions. And so one we have here is, how do you see yourself using your degrees and research in the future? Where do you see yourself 5 years from now?
Ooh. Great question. So, what's incredible about the NECR program and this degree specifically is that it is so widely applicable. Regardless of the field you go into, regardless of what you want to do, who you are, it will make your life better. It will make your life better in speaking with your family, your friends, roommate situations, relationships. It provides you with an unparalleled foundation in communication, understanding, and strategies for peace and negotiation. So it is in every aspect highly applicable. So regardless of what the future might hold, I am very grateful that I will be able to utilize this degree without any shadow of a doubt. My professional career, which I didn't speak to here, is in higher education. And I use my degree every day. I work with students. I, have to work with administrators. In every social interaction I have, I'm using uh, aspects of my degree and tools that I gathered in this degree. And I'm so grateful for that. So 5 years from now, we'll see. I love research. I love research, period. I have been toying with the idea of a PhD purely because I love research. Um, but I think that for now, I'm going to continue to work and to hopefully continue research on the side. If, again, anyone wants to email me for collaboration, feel free. Um, it's just something that I really enjoy doing. In terms of the field, I'm truly grateful for the time I've spent in identity-based uh, conflict and conflict resolution. And I am very interested in still pursuing those issues of, morality, identity, values, and whatnot. And I've also been seeing how they play over into the business context. I'm really interested in uh, corporate social responsibility, how employees feel about participating in social good work at their jobs. And I think that that's going to become really important moving forward. Another aspect that I think is going to be a hot topic is that of climate change refugees. So people who are displaced, forced migration due to climate change. Right now, unfortunately, we're already seeing the effects of climate change in horrifying and devastating ways throughout not only the country, but the world. And I think that these are going to get worse. And I fear that we don't have precedent for what to do with people who can no longer live where they were living because of the climate. So this is something that I touched on in my work in Uganda. In Uganda already, there are people who are being forced out of their homes and forced out of um, their living situation. If it's like a tribal situation, they usually have communities that migrate, right? They migrate throughout, and they follow the crops, and they follow the livestock, and that's always been their life. And climate change is pushing the boundaries of where they can migrate. And what do you do when people who are in established cities, or there's a, established infrastructure, there's no longer dirt roads, but it turns into paved roads, and you can't have cattle graze on pavement. What do you do, and how do you preemptively mitigate the conflict that will come up with those two people, or those two communities, those two groups of people coming into contact and arguing about their land situation, land use, water, um, rights to shelter. So I think that climate change adaptation measurements are really needed, and they can't just focus on policies for businesses and, the world at large. I think they also need to focus on the movement of people. So I'm interested to see where this will go, because I do think it's going to be a very hot topic in the next 5, 10, 20 years. And I hope to be a part of that conversation.
Great, thank you. And in your answer, you've sort of talked about this a little broadly. So just to piggyback, what other related job positions do people coming out of this program go into? I think that's a we both
Sure.
really talk more about that. But if there are any interesting examples, or if you wanted to speak to that a little bit, because what don't
Absolutely. Exactly. And I think that is the question. What don't you do with a degree in negotiation and conflict resolution? Truly. Um, I like to think of it in terms of buckets. I think that there is a bucket of people who are interested in business negotiations. So, I met people in my program who did contract negotiations for large corporations and businesses in every field, in the sports industry, in banking, in social policy, in government, in military, really in every field. So that's more of a like the negotiation bucket I like to think of. And then I think there's a mediation bucket. I think there are people who come to this program with the intent to pursue mediation. So whether they have been lawyers in the past and they have like an ADR background, or they're just interested in mediation, going into mediation on their own in terms of divorce mediation. There was someone in my program who was really interested in divorce mediation specifically, but mediation on in every level. It can be at the international level, mediation between countries, mediations between businesses, mergers. So mediation can really play into, again, any aspect of society. So this program is really good for people who are interested in that sort of bucket as well. Then there is a bucket of communication experts. And these people are really interesting because they span all of the buckets. They are interested in advancing their understanding of the social world, so like sociology, political theory, political thought, political science, social science is a huge one, absolutely social science, and seeing how communication kind of plays into that, how identity, who we are as ourselves, as practitioners, as mediators, as negotiators, and building that skill of who you are, and utilizing that. And I think the last bucket, which I fell under, is the bucket of those interested in global affairs, those interested in international peace building, international conflict resolution, people who are interested, and again, this could be at many levels, but people who are interested in going into, the sort of thing where I did, working with US aid and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, people interested in pursuing a job or a consultancy or whatnot with the UN, definitely fall into that bucket. People who are just more interested on the wider look at the conflict resolution field in a global context.
That's great. Yes. And
if you have any to add, please.
Oh no, there's so much. But ultimately, when you work and deal with yourself as well as other people, all of the skills that are taught in the program, the theories are completely applicable. So that's one of the joys, I think, of the program too, is that in every cohort, everyone has such different backgrounds and experiences.
Yes.
That, I personally was coming from a nonprofit K through 12 background. And so, I would have never in my life probably met anyone who worked at Goldman Sachs, for instance. And there's just so many paths that cross. And that is a really kind of amazing developmental, academic, and just sort of social experience. So yes, and also I appreciate Deborah too speaking today, particularly on the research angle, because you mentioned this briefly, but that's another road that people go down as well. And this is why we do these series as well, because everyone's story and path to conflict resolution is unique and personal. And because there are so many different examples. That's why we started the series in the spring. We had a mediator join us, and then also someone who had ombuds and UN professional background as well. And so we'll continue doing this throughout the year. And I know that you wear, here, a couple other questions. Thank you, everyone.
Sure.
And so, Deborah, I know you wear lots of hats as demonstrated today. Would you be able to share your job titles? Yes.
Sure. Like professionally?
Yes.
Okay, sure. So again, I come from a higher education background. I'm a higher education professional by training. And during my time at the Earth Institute, I was super lucky to work in the team of the Office of Academic and Research Programs. And there I was a program coordination assistant. So I handled the program aspects of specifically the undergraduate program in sustainable development. I loved it. I never knew higher education could be so fun. I loved working with students. I loved working with administrators. I loved helping people's dreams come true. And I stayed in that internship for 3 years with an incredible, incredible team. And I was given incredible opportunities, such as the program in Jordan and Israel, the Regional Environmental Sustainability Program in the Middle East. My supervisor should be in this picture, unless she was the one taking the picture. Oh, no, she's on the other side of Beth, I think. So yes, I was given incredible opportunities through that internship. And I went on to continue program coordination. I'm highly detail oriented, and I'm very good at managing multiple shifting priorities. So I excelled at program coordination, and I really liked it, and I liked being good at it. And I went on to be the program coordinator for the Office of Social Justice Initiatives at Columbia Law School. Also an incredible opportunity to work with a population law that I'd not worked with before. And specifically in the Office of Social Justice Initiatives, we were working on the social justice and government programs. So very up my alley. I was the advisor to, like, not the advisor, it was more of like I guess, the person who's like administrator. There we go. The administrator to the environmental group at Columbia Law School. So that was really cool, learning about environmental law and getting involved with them. We went to the climate march that year. And I had an incredible time really delving into those issues. And I wanted to work more with people. I worked a little bit with some law students, but that wasn't really my job. My job was more to be on the back end in terms of coordinating their programs. So I stepped into the role of advisor at the School of Professional Studies, where I worked with people who were in their master's degrees from the point of request for information for your degree all the way through graduation. And I was really lucky to work with some incredible programs and have incredible academic directors that I worked with, and an incredible team. And I worked with a few different programs at SPS, and I all the while was pursuing my my master's degree part-time. And once I graduated, I was offered this fellowship in Israel to do the conflict mitigation grant with USAID, and it was an opportunity that I could not say no to. So I became a fellow for JDC Israel, for the American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee. I didn't have an official title, but I usually just call myself the Community of Equals Fellow, because I was brought on to work specifically with this program, with this grant, the Community of Equals grant. And sometimes when I talk about the grant, I'll more describe myself as like a monitoring and evaluation fellow, because that's really where my responsibilities lay. And then once that grant closed, I just became a fellow with Israel Unlimited, working on other initiatives through their DNA model. So that was just a simple title of fellow.
Thank you.
Sure.
And so during your involvement in the West Bank Gaza intervention,
Yeah.
were you personally working with or alongside Palestinians in their communities, or were you more involved in planning and hypothesizing?
Yeah. So both. We were a team of a dozen or so, maybe more, but a dozen at least, a dozen maximum in the office. For Israel Unlimited, the Center for Disabilities at JDC Israel. And specifically working on that program, there was a national coordinator who was Palestinian. And I worked with her directly. And it was the two of us under supervision of a staff member at JDC Israel, who is Arab Israeli. And so the three of us, we also had someone who handled all of the cheshbonit, all of the like checks and financial financial aspects of everything. So we had someone who was specifically brought on to do that for this project because the audit process was a process and everything was triple, quadruple checked by USAID and whatnot. So we had to be very stringent about that. And that was our team. We worked very closely with an incredible resource development coordinator who really handled a lot of we worked together on a lot of the writing for our grant reports and whatnot. But in terms of the planning, it was really up to the national coordinator. So I got to be very involved with the planning aspects of it, of the programs, as well as the monitoring and evaluation of the programs and the audit process of the programs. And I was able to get involved and meet people in their communities. I don't have a picture of me there, but I think this is a picture that I took in Hora, which is in the south, and it's a Bedouin community. And I would go there usually like once a week, once every 2 weeks. So this was later on working with deaf and hearing impaired Bedouin women, but I think it just is a really good example of how what an incredible opportunity it was for me to be involved with people on the ground at sports events, women's empowerment groups. We actually held a meeting of the people who are like the leaders in the ground, on the ground. So people who, so the JDC would contract out work or partnership opportunities with developed and established NGOs, because the JDC, which I really value about them, recognize that they're not an expert in this field, and there are people who are experts in this field who have been doing this work. So why not partner with them to get the best possible outcome for our participants? So we had NGOs in all 4 of our areas, multiple NGOs usually in these 4 areas that we worked with. And I was very involved with the leaders of this organization specifically. We would meet up and talk about what was going on and what challenges we're facing, how we can support those challenges, how USAID can support those challenges and whatnot. So it was really multifaceted in my involvement.
Thank you. And what were the intended results of the program implementation?
Sure, yes. So we were hoping to have the program run with an extension. I mean, that was already lined up and ready to go. It was a 3-year program. And we were hoping to be able to establish in terms of the academic research forum, we were hoping to establish a highly qualified team of researchers who would work on public policy in this area. So let me pull up here. And there really isn't a lot of research published on people with disabilities, specifically in West Bank, Gaza, Jordan, like the surrounding community. And so this was an incredible opportunity to pull over some groundbreaking research that was going on in other Arab countries and to see how we could make it accessible and make it, again, part of public policy here in Israel. So that was the goal for that. For sports, the goal was to create a community and promote healthy living. People with disabilities have a very hard time joining sports leagues and whatnot. And so we promoted and funded NGOs who were already working in that field to grow their offerings and grow their teams of people with disabilities. And we would have, participants who were interested be able to go and play bocce or whatever sport that they were able to play, and make connections with each other. And we did it all around Israel and all around East Jerusalem, and parts of the West Bank. And we were able to create a source of fun and a community around that. So that was really great. For the religious leaders trainings, we hoped to really help religious leaders understand challenges that are possibly going on in their communities that they might not know about, and be able to be a source of knowledge, be a source of understanding. So, a rabbi who speaks to inclusion in their synagogue might be the first religious leader to talk to a congregant in that way about inclusion for people with disabilities. And that's a really important step in raising awareness. So the religious leaders trainings were all about raising awareness about the needs of people with disabilities and the policies in place now, and brainstorming what religious leaders could do for people with disabilities in their communities. And the women's empowerment group was really, really cool. I went to Barnard, so I was always a fan of that one. And it was, we would get groups of women together. We would specifically choose spaces that were accessible, highly accessible for women and people with disabilities. And they would come together in a sharing of experience, identity, challenges, and out of that came incredible results of empowerment. And they created initiatives in various regions and areas. It was really incredible. We partnered with NGOs to facilitate these groups and specifically work with women and NGOs who understand the challenges of women in these areas, again, in different regions. So it was a really, really wonderful opportunity for women to not only overcome the disability barrier, but also the gender barrier.
Great, thank you. And I just want to do a quick time check because we have about 2 minutes, but also a whole bunch of really good questions. So in case we don't get to your question, do feel free to email and connect with Deborah because these are all really good. So,
Yes.
but really quickly, just sorry. Did you do any follow-up with the Special Needs Bedouin Israeli project as to whether they had any lasting effects and long-term benefits to both communities?
Oh, I love that. Yes, we did. I'm still in touch with one of the women who actually taught me sign language while I was there. I wanted to be able to communicate with the women. So she and I worked one-on-one a bit. Yeah, it was, the program was ongoing up until the COVID pandemic. With that, everything shut down. But the program, I was able and often met with the leadership of the program that included people from the ministry and leaders of the NGOs on the ground and the teachers in the rooms with the women and men. And I presented our research to them, and we made strategic changes to the pilot accordingly. And they really took everything to heart. And yeah, it was a really successful program that unfortunately, because of COVID, is not so much happening anymore. but the follow-up was really, really positive.
That is great. Well, thank you so much, Deborah, and thank you
Yes.
to everyone today who joined us and listened in. We will be providing a recording of this. So in case there's anything you want to hear over again, you're welcome to. There are also, there's two really great questions. One is about the Rwanda conclusions that you had, and also water usage. So if you are someone who asked those questions, do feel free to reach out to Deborah because
Yes,
those are great
please.
and deserve to be answered. I just am sorry that we're in a time crunch, but thank you all. And I do hope you'll join us again for our future career deep dives. Please check out the SPS NECR website under events. You can sign up for our October and November deep dive. So thank you again. Wishing everyone a safe, healthy rest of the week. Take care.
Thank you.